Hello, I would like to introduce Micha Meinderts, author of the books Aldus Sybren, Kadans, Dubel Leven, and Och in Och. And
That's pretty good.
oh, thank you. And he is Arkana's guest all the way from the Netherlands. Welkom, Micha. And
Thank you.
thank you for joining us. So, even though I have translated, or I did translate the front of your book for to get an understanding of it, I
Uh-huh.
would like to hear you read the subheading of the front, if you could,
Oh my God.
in
Yeah.
in the
So
Dutch.
let me get the book because I don't know it by heart.
Oh, I was okay.
So this one, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So it says roman over een jonge transgender man die zijn draai probeert te vinden in zijn nieuwe leven.
Very nice. That is really pretty.
Thanks.
And would you care to tell us just a bit about it?
Yeah, sure. It's autobiographical novel, meaning I used things I went through myself as a basis for a fictional story.
Mm-hmm.
The main character, Sybren, when he was about 8, he and his family moved from the Netherlands to the US, Michigan to be exact. And 20 years later, he returns back to the Netherlands after his transition from female to male. Um, and in the Netherlands, he tries to both become Dutch again and find out his place in the world as a man uh, and how he relates to other men in his life,
Mm-hmm.
new friends, old friends, etc., etc. Um, and basically how to live the rest of his life after making the pretty impactful choice to move back to the Netherlands. No, I mean to transition.
Yeah. Well, I think that's fascinating, especially since so many books about transition or just stories about transition in general do tend to focus on the decision to transition and kind of that process, and basically don't talk about life after transition quite as much.
Exactly.
Yeah. Speaking as a writer myself, I find anything kind of autobiographical quite difficult. What was the biggest challenge for you in writing this book?
Um, I think partly not offending anyone in my life, um,
I can see that.
and and sifting through everything that happened and figure out what the important parts were and figuring out what supported the story I wanted to tell because I
Mm-hmm.
obviously I didn't want to tell my story because no one really wants to read my particular story. I wanted to make it bigger than myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to filter um, figuring out what would support that story and how I would adapt because I didn't move when I was 8. I was 24.
Mm-hmm.
Um, things like that. Uh, So I think that was the hardest part. Like, so what do I use basically?
Yeah. Well, out of curiosity, I would really like to know about your writing process.
hmm
How would you describe your process as a writer?
Um, basically, I just started with one or two scenes that I knew were supposed to be in there,
Mm-hmm.
and I used those to basically find a tone and
Mm-hmm.
find a character because the main character is not exactly like me, so I had to
Mm-hmm.
figure out like what he was like. Um, And once I had those two key scenes, I started going, writing the bits leading up to those,
Mm-hmm.
writing the bits after, um, deleting a lot in the process because it just wasn't
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And so what I go every year. I go to a writing retreat in northern France with a bunch of friends, um, and that's just a week of like writing and
Mm-hmm.
talking about writing and reading and talking about reading and everything. So I wrote a lot there, about I don't know 20,000 words or so.
Wow.
Um, And then half a year later, I lost my job, and I was unemployed for a couple months. So I
Mm-hmm.
just used that time to write the rest, and that was the
Mm-hmm.
first draft. And I asked friends to read it for me,
Mm-hmm.
author friends, so actually, like they could give me pointers,
Yeah.
and based on their comments, I would rewrite and have some other people read it, and well, do that a couple
Yeah.
times. I think all in all, I have about 50 different versions. Not necessarily majorly different, but still.
Yeah.
Um, and then I found an agent, and she found me another agent because she became a publisher.
Mm-hmm.
And the agent found a publisher, and that was another 3 or 4 different versions because everyone wants to like make their mark basically.
Yeah.
Um, Everyone thinks differently about okay, is what's gonna make it a good novel, and
Yeah.
this is gonna make it sell. And so yeah, and then the editor went over it again, and then finally had the last version. And the good thing was that even after reading it like 50 times, I still enjoyed reading it, which was not the case with
Yeah.
previous novels. So I knew it was good,
Yeah.
but it was a lot of revision.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and yeah,
Yeah.
that's basically what writing is. It's like
Mm-hmm.
revising.
Yeah, it
That's what
really
it's
is.
creating.
Yeah. So, this is a bit of a multi-part question, but
hmm
how long have you been writing? And kind of what's your background? Did you study it in university? Kind of what's your earliest memory of being a writer?
My earliest memory is scribbling on colored paper and stapling it together to make a book. So I was writing before I could read. Um, then, when I was about 9, I think, I got my parents' old typewriter.
Mm-hmm.
Or my mom's, I have to say, it was not both of them. Um, and I started writing stories on the typewriter, and then we got a computer
Mm-hmm.
in, I think, 1990. So I switched to digital writing.
So were you on DOS or did you actually?
No, Windows
Okay.
3.11. So we had Word for Windows. That I
Yeah.
think that was the first one, and I moved to WordPerfect pretty quickly after that. Yeah, and I've always written, I've always
Mm-hmm.
read. When I was 10, I became pen pals with what would grow out to be the most famous Dutch author for kids. But
Wow.
back then he wasn't yet.
Mm-hmm.
And he's always uh, encouraged me to keep writing.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, his publisher too. I sent some of my stuff to his publisher, and even though it wasn't like the type of stuff they would even publish, even if it was good enough,
Mm-hmm.
um, he gave me a lot of pointers,
Mm-hmm.
and helped me. And actually, that publishing house employed me as a webmaster
Oh wow.
uh, in the year that I started college. I studied to become an editor, so
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I did, thinking it would improve my own writing, but it's just easier to see what's wrong with your own writing without being able to. So that didn't work too well, but
Mm-hmm.
and then I did my internship at a publishing house. I was like, okay, this um, company culture type thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then by then I had a boyfriend in the U.S. and then he was going to move there anyway, so I didn't
Mm-hmm.
really try so hard to find a job in the field that I wanted.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, then I moved to the US and I started Ernest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So,
is that basically all the answers you need?
oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I was kind of curious since I know we do have people who like younger writing. Who is what's the name of the Dutch children's author?
Paul van Loon. Um,
How do you spell
he
that?
actually his series about the kid werewolf is translated in English.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's called Alfie the Werewolf. I'm not sure how many there are now, but there's
Okay.
about 20 books, all in all in Dutch.
Okay. I will.
Um,
I will check that
yeah,
out.
he wrote a lot more. He wrote like I don't know about 150 books by now
Mm-hmm.
in 30 years.
Wow.
Lots of like early reader little books, but also like for nine and older
Mm-hmm.
about a bus basically.
Yeah.
It's the horror bus where this
Wow.
werewolf author reads to kids and then
Mm-hmm.
eats them basically. And, yeah, it's really cool.
That
It was
sounds great.
like around the time that the Goosebumps series got really popular.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was thinking that sounded kind of familiar, but out of curiosity, what would you say the most influential moment for you along the road of, or what was the most influential moment for you along the road of becoming a writer?
His encouragement.
Mm.
Yeah, that was really important. Like someone at that level believing in me, and not
Mm-hmm.
just saying that, but he would like go into detail what I was doing right
Mm-hmm.
and what parts could use improvement. So he wasn't just saying that to a fan, but he was actually encouraging me. And he was the one that got the first copy of my book during the presentation.
Oh wow,
Uh, so that became pretty much full circle there, and so his support has always been very important to me.
that's so cool. Who would you say some of your inspirations are?
It's really hard to say because I've always felt like I developed my own style independently, like without thinking of
Mm-hmm.
like how I wanted to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but him and his one of his colleagues. So back in the 90s, there was like 8 horror writers that would form a writing society for kids,
Mm-hmm.
and some of them they all had a very distinctive style, and some of them I yeah influenced my style, but I don't think I was influenced by anyone for subject. Um,
Okay. Do you work in any other forms of writing, such as poetry, script, or any other artistic mediums like drawing, music, theater?
I used to draw, but I'm so language oriented that I
Mm-hmm.
find it very hard to find, or I can put the words in my head on paper, but I cannot put the images in my head on paper, so I
Mm-hmm.
stopped doing that. Um, I tried poetry when I was a teenager, because what teenager doesn't? But I'm too literal for
Mm-hmm.
poetry. Um, And no, language prose is the only way for me to express myself. Uh, I might
Yeah.
do a scenario maybe sometime.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be fun, but not right now. I don't have any reason or
Yeah.
ideas that would fit that format.
Oh. Well, from what I've seen online, your book looks like it's getting pretty positive reviews and a lot of comments. So congratulations on
Thank
that.
you.
Has it been reaching across borders much, or is your audience predominantly within the Netherlands?
Well, Belgium because
Mm-hmm.
language, but no, there's interest from a couple different countries,
Mm-hmm.
but by the time interest pans out, it's like 2, 3 years.
Yeah.
Um,
So
and it's a difficult market. I mean,
yeah.
it's a pretty universal subject, all in all, like finding your place in the world, basically, and
Mm-hmm.
finding out who you are. Um, but it's hard for people to see that
Mm-hmm.
when it's such a controversial topic
Yeah.
um, in itself.
Mm-hmm.
The main challenge is getting people to look through that um, and see it for what it actually is, I guess.
So since you speak both Dutch and English, um, what have you noticed as differences between the styles in Dutch and English language writing? Obviously, this could depend quite a bit on, say, what country the English is being spoken, say England or America. But have you noticed any differences in the style or delivery?
What I've noticed in the English that I read um, is that it's far richer. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
so many more words in English than there are in Dutch. That most books I read in English still have like every other page is a word that I don't know,
Oh.
and I really do wonder if the author actually knows it or just looked it up. It's far less so like Dutch is cleaner, I think,
Mm-hmm.
um, in vocabulary, but then it's easier to play around with the word order.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think because I've translated my own stuff to English, not all of it, because it's a hell of a job, honestly,
Yeah.
and not much fun.
Yeah.
Uh, but what I noticed is I cannot emulate what I do in Dutch with word order in English, and that might be because English is not my native language.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I do feel that's a big difference. You can pretty much put any word group at any position in a sentence, and it would change. It wouldn't change the meaning per se, but it would change the emphasis
Yeah.
and the rhythm too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, yeah, word order and vocabulary is like the biggest. Hello cat. Um, I did write directly in English, and I notice how that changes my style. Becomes a bit more archaic,
Mm-hmm.
a bit more melodramatic, because there's just so many more English words to like
Yeah.
create this larger than life emotions.
Yeah.
Um,
I hadn't even considered that.
yeah, it's quite cool actually, and maybe because I was writing vampire fiction,
Yeah.
so you kind of need that as well. So it might have been the genre as well, but
So English is good for melodrama and being
yes,
larger than life.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, pretty much, yeah, I think so, yeah.
It's good to know. So, do you have any plans? Um, it doesn't sound like you have any plans to do an English translation yourself, but do you know if you might try and make one available?
Oh
Or,
yeah,
mm-hmm.
I'd love to,
Mm-hmm.
but I would need a publisher in the U.S.,
Mm-hmm.
Australia, whatever English-speaking country to buy the rights and
Mm-hmm.
publish it there. Um, Publisher's working on it,
Mm-hmm.
but you know it's a difficult market, and
Yeah.
but yeah, I really hope so because there's you know from what I also like I know this person like a trans activist in South Africa
Mm-hmm.
that um, let me know that it would be so beneficial because there's hardly anything for them there.
Oh, yeah.
See, it's not just the U.S. and the UK and Australia that speaks
Mm-hmm.
English. It's like lots of countries in Africa and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, if I could only find like the right publisher,
Mm-hmm.
um, but yeah, I'd love to. I would love to be able to help so many more people because that's basically the comments I get is from either relatives or friends of
Mm-hmm.
trans people that are like, oh, I understand my brother, my mother, anyone so much better now,
Mm-hmm.
or trans people themselves that let me know like, oh, I don't feel alone, and now there's hope, and I feel like after transition I can lead a full life.
Oh, good.
uh, and I would really love for my book to be able to do that for people that don't speak Dutch.
Yeah. Well, that's great, and it kind of transitions into the next thing I was going to ask you. Um, since the transgender community has been receiving so much more press and attention in the media of late, um, and we're seeing more trans characters in shows like Transparent and films like The Danish Girl or
Hmm.
Breakfast on Pluto. Um, what do you believe that transgender writers and characters have to offer to writing and to literature? I mean, obviously, there's help to the families, and that's definitely important. But I was curious if you could think of anything else.
Well, we have a pretty unique perspective on gender itself. Most of us have experienced society from both sides of the coin.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm not sure I personally feel like I did, but also because Dutch society is slightly different.
Mm-hmm.
In that regard, it's more equal, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think, especially for cisgender people that never really thought about it,
Mm-hmm.
it's good to like stop and think for a bit what it means to be whatever gender they are, um, how that makes them relate to other people around them, um, and I think it would help make men and women more equal. Um, because all in all, we're not that different from each
Mm-hmm.
other. Um, I think there's more differences between two women from a certain group than there are between men and women as a group. Uh, so yeah, I think transmedia, if done well, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
um, can provide a good means of equality between men and women.
Excellent. What advice would you give to writers?
Read.
Yeah.
You cannot find, yeah, and not just read like lay back on the couch and just read, but find out what makes a book or a comic or a scenario or whatever, what makes it that you want to read more, or what makes you hate it.
Mm-hmm.
What is the author doing that works for you or doesn't work for you? How are the characters developed, if they are, and if they're not, does it bother you? Stuff like that. Um, and just write. Like
Mm-hmm.
you have to practice, and even if it's shit, it's way easier to edit some shit text than it is to edit a blank page.
Definitely.
Um,
Yeah.
so
Definitely.
yeah, basically do, you
Mm-hmm.
know, whatever. The if you're really out of ideas, go sit in the subway and listen to what people are saying around you, and write it down and try to figure out, okay, so where are they coming from? Where are they going to?
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, use your imagination.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to include a link to your Facebook page where people can follow you and also your Twitter. Um, is there anywhere else that you can be found online, and where can people find your work to publish?
Um, I do have Instagram, which is actually in English. Also on my homepage is
So,
apart from the blog, it's available in English as well, including a couple fragments from my novels.
okay.
Um, I think that's it. I'm not that
Okay.
much of a social media person type.
that works. Well, thank you so very, very much. I
Thanks for
appreciate it.
having me.
Yeah.